The crystal spires of the Istrian imperial palace caught the light of 3 setting suns, casting rainbow shadows across Princess Lyra's chambers. She stood at the window, her iridescent skin shifting through shades of violet and blue as she fought to control her mounting anxiety. The news she had received that morning still echoed in her mind, each word feeling like a death sentence. "The council has reached a decision," her father, Emperor Theron, had announced. "To secure lasting peace between our peoples, you will wed Commander Marcus Sterling of the Human Alliance." A human. They wanted her to marry a human. Lyra's attendant, Vela, approached quietly, her footsteps barely audible on the polished crystalline floor. "Your Highness, perhaps it won't be as terrible as you fear." "How can it not be?" Lyra turned, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with distress. "Have you heard the stories about humans? They're violent, unpredictable. Their entire history is written in bloodshed." The reports she'd studied painted a frightening picture. Humans had emerged onto the galactic stage barely a century ago, and in that time, they'd fought their way to becoming a major power through sheer determination and what many species considered barbaric tactics. Commander Sterling's name appeared frequently in military reports, a ruthless strategist who had never lost a battle. "They say he once sacrificed an entire fleet to win a war," Lyra whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. "How can I bind myself to someone capable of such things?" Vela adjusted the flowing layers of Lyra's ceremonial robes, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps that's why the council chose him. Our borders have never been more threatened. The Nexus Raiders grow bolder with each passing cycle." Lyra knew she was right. The Raiders had been pressing deeper into Istrian space, their advanced technology overwhelming the Empire's defense systems. The humans, with their unconventional warfare and adaptable strategies, had proven remarkably effective at repelling similar threats. "Politics," Lyra spat the word like a curse. "Our people have always prided ourselves on our enlightenment, our dedication to peace and knowledge. Now we're so desperate we'll ally ourselves with warriors who barely understand the concept of diplomacy." A soft chime interrupted her brooding, announcing the arrival of her mother, Empress Celeste. The elegant matriarch glided into the room, her presence immediately commanding attention. Unlike Lyra's turbulent color changes, the Empress maintained a serene pearl-like shimmer. "My daughter," Celeste spoke softly, "I sense your turmoil from 3 levels below. Your emotions are broadcasting quite strongly." Lyra tried to steady herself, forcing her colors to settle into more muted tones. "Mother, please. There must be another way to secure this alliance." "The humans respect strength, commitment, and direct action," Celeste explained, moving to stand beside her daughter. "A marriage between our houses carries weight that no mere treaty could match. Commander Sterling's influence among their military leadership is considerable. But why him? Why not a human diplomat or politician?" Celeste's expression grew serious. "Because, my dear one, we need more than just pretty words and promises. The Raiders have already taken 3 outer colonies. Their ships have been detected scouting the Celestial Belt. If they breach those defenses..." She left the thought unfinished. Lyra turned back to the window, watching as the last sun dipped below the horizon, leaving only the natural glow of the Crystal City to illuminate the gathering dusk. She understood the political necessity, the strategic advantages. But that didn't make the prospect any less terrifying. "The commander arrives in 3 days," Celeste continued. "A preliminary meeting to discuss terms and allow you both to assess the situation." 3 days. Lyra's colors flashed in alarm. "So soon? The Raiders won't wait while we take our time with pleasantries. You are a princess of the Istrian Empire, Lyra. Your people look to you for strength." Lyra squared her shoulders, calling upon generations of royal breeding to master her expression. "And they shall have it, mother. I will do my duty." As her mother and Vela left her to her thoughts, Lyra pressed a hand against the cool crystal of the window. Somewhere out there, a human warrior was preparing to meet his alien bride. She wondered if he felt the same dread, the same uncertainty. Somehow, she doubted it. Everything she'd learned about humans suggested they faced their challenges head-on, with a determination that bordered on recklessness. In 3 days, she would come face-to-face with Commander Marcus Sterling. The thought sent another ripple of color across her skin. 3 days to prepare herself to meet the man who might either be her people's salvation or the architect of their cultural destruction. The stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, and Lyra found herself searching them, wondering which one currently held the human fleet. What kind of man was Marcus Sterling? The reports painted him as brilliant but ruthless, effective but dangerous. Would he see her as a person, or merely as a political tool to be used and discarded? She had 3 days to find her courage. 3 days to ready herself to face a human up close. 3 days before her life would change forever. The human ships emerged from hyperspace like dark arrows against the jeweled backdrop of Astrian space. From her position in the ceremonial greeting hall, Princess Lyra watched the fleets approach on the massive holographic display. Their design was distinctly utilitarian, all sharp angles and armored plating, so different from the elegant spiral ships of her people. Commander Sterling's flagship, the Intrepid, took point position, its size dwarfing the escort vessels. The ship's designation scrolled across the display in both human and Astrian script, along with a stream of technical data that made Lyra's heart race. The weapon's capabilities alone were staggering. "Remember," Emperor Theron murmured beside her, "show strength. Humans respect that above all else." Lyra straightened her posture, willing her skin to maintain a diplomatic shade of calm measure. The welcoming chamber was filled with members of the royal court, their collective anxiety creating a shimmer of colors that rippled through the crowd like waves. The human delegation was announced with a series of ceremonial chimes. Lyra held her breath as the massive doors slid open, revealing a group of uniformed figures. Her eyes immediately found Commander Marcus Sterling. It was impossible not to. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, his dark dress uniform adorned with medals and insignias that spoke of countless victories. But it was his eyes that caught her off guard. She had expected cold calculation, perhaps even cruelty. Instead, she found herself met with an intense gaze that held unexpected depth. They were the color of storm clouds, alert and intelligent, taking in every detail of the chamber and its occupants. Sterling approached the royal dais and executed a perfect Astrian bow, not too deep, not too shallow. "Your Imperial Majesties," his voice was deep and controlled, with a resonance that seemed to fill the chamber. "On behalf of the Human Alliance, I thank you for your hospitality." Emperor Theron inclined his head. "Commander Sterling, your reputation precedes you, as does the beauty and wisdom of your empire, Your Majesty." Sterling's gaze shifted to Lyra, and she felt her colors threaten to fluctuate, and especially that of Princess Lyra. The formal introductions continued, a careful dance of diplomatic protocol. Sterling's human delegation remained perfectly composed, though Lyra noticed their subtle glances at the crystalline architecture and the bioluminescent displays of the Astrian court. They were just as curious about her people as she was about them. Later, during the welcoming feast, Lyra found herself seated beside Sterling as tradition demanded. Up close, she could see the faint scars on his hands, marks of a life spent in service and combat. Yet his movements were precise and elegant as he navigated the unfamiliar Astrian dining customs. "I imagine this isn't quite what you expected, Your Highness," Sterling said quietly, during a lull in the formal conversations around them. Lyra hesitated before responding. "I'm not sure what I expected, Commander." A slight smile touched his lips. "Please, call me Marcus. And I suspect you expected someone more barbaric? We're aware of how humans are often perceived." His directness startled her. "You must understand," she found herself saying, "your species' approach to warfare is quite different from ours." "Different doesn't always mean wrong," he replied, his voice thoughtful. "Sometimes survival requires us to be adaptable, to make difficult choices." Before she could respond, an aide hurried to Sterling's side, whispering something urgent in his ear. The commander's expression shifted subtly, but Lyra caught the change, a sharpening of his features, a new tension in his shoulders. "My apologies, Your Highness," he said, rising smoothly. "It seems duty calls. But I hope we'll have the opportunity to continue our conversation soon." As he strode from the hall, conferring quietly with his officers, Lyra found herself watching him with growing curiosity. There was something about him that didn't quite match the reports she'd studied. Yes, she could see the warrior, the strategist who had earned such fearsome reputation. But there were layers beneath that facade, intelligence, complexity, and perhaps something else she couldn't quite name. "Well?" Velo whispered, appearing at her side. "Is he what you feared?" Lyra considered the question carefully. "No," she admitted. "He's something else entirely." The feast continued around them, but Lyra's thoughts remained with the unexpected encounter. She had prepared herself to meet a monster, a brutal human warrior. Instead, she found herself intrigued by a man who seemed to defy her every preconception. As the evening wore on, reports began filtering through the court about increased raider activity at the Empire's borders. Each time news arrived, Lyra found herself watching Sterling's human officers, noting their efficient, precise responses. They operated like a well-oiled machine, even here in the midst of diplomatic pleasantries. Perhaps, she thought, there was something to learn from their approach after all. The raiders wouldn't be deterred by elegant words or traditional Istrian tactics. Maybe what her people needed was exactly what the humans offered, a different way of thinking, a new approach to facing their threats. But as she retired to her chambers that night, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that she had only scratched the surface of understanding Commander Marcus Sterling. And somehow, that thought was both terrifying and strangely exciting. The crystal observation deck aboard the Istrian defense station provided a panoramic view of the joint fleet exercises. Lyra watched as human and Istrian ships maneuvered together, their contrasting designs creating an unusual but striking formation against the star-filled backdrop. Commander Sterling stood beside her, his presence both commanding and surprisingly comforting after the past few days of working together. "Your ships are learning our patterns quickly," he observed, tracking a squadron of spiral-shaped Istrian vessels as they executed a complex defensive maneuver alongside human cruisers. "The integration is proceeding faster than expected, as are the complaints from certain members of the court," Lyra replied, her skin rippling with subtle hues of concern. The conservative faction, led by Grand Minister Vax, had been vocal about their opposition to what they called human contamination of Istrian military doctrine. Marcus turned to face her, his expression serious. "Change always meets resistance, Your Highness. But the raiders won't wait for your people to feel comfortable with new ideas." As if to emphasize his point, an urgent alert flashed across the holographic displays. A raider scout ship had been detected near the Celestial Belt. Without hesitation, Marcus activated his comm unit, issuing crisp orders to the fleet. Lyra watched in fascination as both human and Istrian ships smoothly transitioned from their exercise formation into an attack pattern she'd never seen before. "This is what I've been trying to show your military council," Marcus explained, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "The raiders expect your traditional response patterns. They've studied them, learned to counter them. But this," he gestured to the unconventional formation, "this they won't expect." The truth of his words became evident as the joint fleet engaged the scout ship. The raiders attempted their usual hit-and-run tactics, but found themselves caught in a trap of overlapping fields of fire. The scout was disabled within minutes, its crew captured rather than allowed to escape with intelligence about the new tactics. "Impressive," Lyra admitted, her colors shifting to reflect her admiration. "Though I suspect Grand Minister Vax will have something to say about this reckless human aggression." A slight smile crossed Marcus's face. "And what do you think, Your Highness? Do you share the minister's concerns about human influence?" The question caught her off guard. Over the past few days, she'd seen a side of humans, of Marcus, that challenged everything she'd been taught to believe. Yes, they were direct, sometimes aggressive in their approach. But there was also an adaptability, a willingness to learn and integrate new ideas that she hadn't expected. I think, she said carefully, that survival requires us to look beyond our comfortable assumptions, even if that means embracing change. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Vela, who approached with barely concealed urgency. Your Highness, Grand Minister Vax has called an emergency session of the Council. He's demanding a review of the marriage alliance. Lyra felt her colors darken with anger, but before she could respond, Marcus spoke. Then we should give him one. His tone was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Let him see exactly what this alliance offers both our peoples. The council chamber was tense when they arrived. Grand Minister Vax, his aged form seeming to vibrate with righteous indignation, stood at the center of a group of conservative ministers. Their colors projected disapproval and fear in waves of murky greens and browns. This is precisely what we feared, Vax announced as Lyra and Marcus entered. Human military doctrine is corrupting our sacred traditions. Today's display was nothing short of barbaric. What I saw, Lyra stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of her royal breeding, was two forces learning to work together, becoming stronger than either could be alone. Is that not what we've always taught, that growth comes through understanding? Marcus remained silent, but his presence beside her lent weight to her words. She could feel his quiet support, and it gave her strength to continue. The raiders are evolving their tactics, she addressed the full council. They study our patterns, exploit our predictability. If we cannot adapt, if we cannot learn new ways to defend ourselves, then we're not preserving our traditions, we're ensuring their extinction. A murmur ran through the chamber. Even some of Vax's supporters showed signs of uncertainty, their colors shifting toward more thoughtful hues. Pretty words, Vax countered, but they don't change the fact that humans are warriors, bred for conflict. Their influence will transform us into something we're not meant to be. With respect, Minister, Marcus finally spoke, his voice resonating through the chamber. We're warriors because we had to be. Earth's history forced us to adapt, to survive against odds that might have broken lesser species. But that same history taught us the value of alliance, of combining strengths rather than trying to stand alone. He stepped forward, his movements measured and deliberate. Your traditions are not under attack. We're not here to change who you are, but to help you survive to preserve those traditions for future generations. The debate raged for hours, but something had shifted in the chamber. More and more council members began to see the wisdom in adaptation, in combining Astrian wisdom with human strength. And through it all, Lyra found herself watching Marcus with new eyes, seeing not the ruthless warrior of legend, but a man of depth and understanding. As they left the council chamber that evening, Marcus turned to her. Thank you for your support in there. It means more than you might think. The warning alarms shattered the pre-dawn quiet of the Imperial Palace. Lyra jolted awake, her skin flashing brilliant warning colors as the emergency protocols activated throughout the Crystal City. The raiders had finally made their move, and it was far bolder than anyone had anticipated. Multiple hostile fleets detected. The announcement echoed through the crystalline corridors. All citizens to emergency shelters. This is not a drill. Lyra rushed to the command center, her ceremonial robes hastily replaced by practical combat gear. The scene that greeted her was one of controlled chaos. Astrian officers worked alongside their human counterparts, their combined efforts coordinated with a precision that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. Marcus stood at the central tactical display, his expression focused as he analyzed the incoming data. They've brought everything, he said as Lyra approached. 3 main battle groups, with at least 2 more holding in reserve. They're not here to raid. This is an invasion. The holographic display showed the raiders' forces surrounding the celestial belt, their ships moving in patterns that seemed almost familiar. Lyra's heart sank as she realized why. They're using our own traditional defensive formations against us. They must have been studying our responses for years. Which is exactly why we're not going to give them what they expect. Marcus's voice carried absolute conviction. Your Highness, I need your trust. What I'm about to propose goes against every conventional Astrian military doctrine. Lyra met his gaze, seeing not the ruthless commander of legend, but the man she'd come to know over the past weeks, brilliant, adaptable, and above all, dedicated to protecting both their peoples. "You have it," she said firmly. The next hours were a blur of activity. Marcus's plan was audacious, combining human aggressive tactics with Astrian technological advantages in ways neither side had considered before. The joint fleet split into seemingly chaotic groups, appearing to fall into disarray under the raiders' assault. "They're buying it," Marcus murmured, watching the raiders press their apparent advantage. "They think we're panicking, falling back on desperate individual actions rather than coordinated defense." Lyra stood beside him, her colors steady despite the tension. She'd learned to read human expressions well enough to see the calculated fury behind his calm exterior. This wasn't just about military victory for him anymore. This was personal. The raiders pushed deeper into the defense zone, confident in their superior numbers and stolen knowledge. That's when Marcus sprung the trap. The scattered fleet elements suddenly moved with perfect coordination, their seemingly random positions forming a three-dimensional net around the raider forces. Human ships provided heavy firepower while Astrian vessels deployed experimental shield technology in revolutionary ways. "Now," Marcus commanded, and the joint fleet struck from all directions at once. The raiders found their own formations turned against them, their stolen tactics useless against this unprecedented combination of human and Astrian warfare. But victory didn't come without cost. A desperate raider commander, realizing they'd been outmaneuvered, launched a suicide run at the planet's main shield generator. Without it, the Crystal City would be exposed to orbital bombardment. Intrepid, moving to intercept, Marcus's voice was cold as space itself as his flagship broke formation to challenge the raider vessel. Lyra watched, her hearts pounding, as the human ship placed itself directly in the raider's path. "Marcus, the Intrepid's shields can't take that kind of impact," she called out, her colors pulsing with fear. "They don't have to," he replied. At the last possible moment, the Intrepid executed a maneuver that should have been impossible for a ship its size. The raider vessel, committed to its attack run, couldn't adjust in time. Marcus's ship took damage, but its calculated sacrifice disrupted the raiders' trajectory enough for the Astrian defense batteries to destroy it. As the battle turned decisively in their favor, Lyra found herself standing closer to Marcus than protocol would normally allow. The command center crew, both human and Astrian, worked with seamless efficiency to coordinate the final stages of the engagement. "You risked everything," she said quietly. "Your ship, your life." Marcus turned to her, and for a moment, the warrior facade fell away. "Some things are worth the risk." His eyes held hers, and Lyra felt her colors shift to hues she'd never displayed before. The raider fleet's surrender came within hours. As prisoners were processed and damage reports filed, Lyra watched the sunrise over her Crystal City, still standing, still beautiful, but forever changed. Just as she was changed. "Your father wants a full briefing," Marcus said, approaching her at the observation window. "And I suspect Grand Minister Vax will have something to say about our unconventional tactics." Lyra felt a smile curve her lips. "Let him. Even he can't argue with results." She turned to face Marcus fully. "You showed us a new way to fight today, a way that doesn't require us to abandon who we are, but to become something greater. We did it together," he corrected her. "Human strength and Astrian wisdom. Perhaps that's what both our peoples have been needing all along." As they stood there, watching the combined fleet patrol the dawn skies, Lyra realized that her fear of humans, of Marcus, had been replaced by something far more powerful. Understanding. Respect. And perhaps something even deeper that she wasn't quite ready to name. In the weeks following the raider attack, the Crystal City bloomed with a mixture of human and Astrian activity. Repair crews worked side by side, rebuilding damaged structures with a blend of both cultures' engineering techniques. The once rigid separation between the species had given way to something new, genuine cooperation and curiosity about each other's ways. Princess Lyra found herself in the midst of this cultural transformation, no longer just a symbol of the alliance, but an active participant in bridging the divide. She stood in the newly established Joint Training Center, watching as human and Astrian officers shared combat techniques and tactical theories. "Your people are natural teachers," Marcus commented, joining her at the observation window. "They've taken our tactical frameworks and improved them in ways we never considered." Lyra's colors shifted to pleased tones of azure and gold. "And your officers have shown remarkable sensitivity to our cultural practices." Even Grand Minister Vax had to admit he was impressed by Lieutenant Chen's mastery of traditional Astrian greeting rituals. Their conversations had grown easier over time, the formal barriers of their first meetings replaced by genuine comfort in each other's presence. Marcus had proven himself not just in battle, but in the equally challenging arena of peace, patient with customs he didn't understand, respectful of traditions while gently pushing for necessary changes. "Walk with me?" he asked, gesturing toward the palace gardens. Lyra nodded, falling into step beside him. The gardens had always been her sanctuary, but sharing them with Marcus had given them new meaning. "The council has been discussing the future of our alliance," she said as they walked beneath crystal archways that scattered rainbow light around them. "Many who opposed it initially are now our strongest supporters." "Amazing what surviving an invasion together can do for diplomatic relations," Marcus replied with a hint of humor. But there was something else in his voice, a tension she'd learned to recognize. They reached a private alcove overlooking the city, one of their favorite spots for candid discussions. Here, away from the formal constraints of court life, they could speak freely. "Something's troubling you," Lyra observed, her colors picking up subtle shifts in his mood that she once would have missed entirely. Marcus turned to face her, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. "The marriage alliance was arranged for political reasons, to unite our peoples against a common threat. But these past weeks, they've changed things. Changed me." Lyra felt her hearts quicken, her bioluminescence responding to emotions she could no longer hide. "How so?" "I came here expecting a diplomatic assignment, a strategic alliance to be managed." He stepped closer, and Lyra's colors rippled in response. "Instead, I found someone who challenges everything I thought I knew. Someone who shows me new ways of seeing the universe every day." "I was terrified of you," Lyra admitted softly. "Of what you represented. The ruthless human commander who sacrificed fleets to win battles. And now I understand that what others call ruthlessness is really determination. The will to protect what matters, no matter the cost." She met his gaze steadily. "I've seen your kindness, Marcus. Your patience with our ways. Your willingness to learn and adapt." He reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, and touched the iridescent markings on her hand. The contact sent shivers of color cascading across her skin. "These past weeks have taught me that strength comes in many forms. Your people's wisdom, your personal courage, they've changed how I think about leadership, about warfare, about everything." Around them, the garden's crystal formations caught the light of the setting suns, creating an intimate atmosphere of shifting colors that seemed to mirror Lyra's own emotional display. She had spent so much time learning to read human expressions that she sometimes forgot how much her own species revealed through their bioluminescence. "The alliance doesn't require us to actually marry," she said carefully. "Now that we've proven our peoples can work together, the council would accept a formal treaty instead." Marcus's hand tightened slightly on hers. "Is that what you want?" Lyra's colors deepened to rich purples and blues, colors of truth and conviction in Astrian culture. "No," she whispered. "That's not what I want at all." The smile that spread across his face was unlike any she'd seen before, full of warmth and promise. "Good," he said simply. "Because I've learned enough about Astrian color signals to know what those particular shades mean." A laugh bubbled up from Lyra's chest, sending sparkles of joy across her skin. "And here I thought I was being subtle." "Nothing about you is subtle," he murmured, drawing her closer. "You're the most remarkable being I've ever met. Human, Astrian, or otherwise." In that moment, surrounded by the crystal gardens of her ancestors, Lyra realized that the political alliance had become something far more meaningful. She and Marcus weren't just bridging the gap between their species, they were creating something entirely new, a fusion of human passion and Astrian wisdom that could change both their civilizations for the better. "We still have challenges ahead," she said, thinking of the ongoing integration efforts and the inevitable cultural clashes to come. "Good," Marcus replied with characteristic determination. "Life without challenges gets boring. And I have a feeling that life with you will never be boring." Their laughter echoed through the crystal gardens, a sound of joy and promise that seemed to resonate with the very heart of the city itself. The day of the ceremony dawned with all three suns aligned in a rare celestial display that the Astrian seers declared auspicious. The crystal city had been transformed, its usual ethereal beauty enhanced by a combination of human and Astrian decorative traditions. Military vessels from both fleets hung in orbit, their formations creating intricate patterns against the morning sky. Inside her preparation chamber, Princess Lyra watched her reflection as Vela made final adjustments to her ceremonial attire. The traditional Astrian wedding robes had been modified to incorporate elements of human formal wear, a physical representation of the union they were celebrating. "You're glowing, Your Highness," Vela observed with a smile. And not just in the usual way. Indeed, Lyra's natural bioluminescence had settled into deep, rich hues of joy and contentment that seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeats. "Everything has changed so much," she mused. "If someone had told me months ago that I would willingly, happily, bind myself to a human." "Life has a way of surprising us," her mother's voice came from the doorway. Empress Celeste entered, her own colors radiating pride and satisfaction. "Though I must admit, even I didn't expect things to unfold quite like this." The Empress moved to stand behind her daughter, their reflections forming a striking pair in the crystal mirror. "When the Council first proposed this alliance, we hoped for tolerance, for workable cooperation between our peoples. Instead, you and Commander Sterling have shown us the possibility of true unity." A gentle chime announced another visitor, Marcus's mother, Catherine Sterling, who had arrived with the human diplomatic delegation. Her presence in the preparation chamber was another break from tradition, but then, this entire wedding was about creating new traditions. "Marcus is just as nervous," Catherine shared with a warm smile. "Though he's trying very hard to maintain that stoic commander facade." The human woman had proved to be a bridge in her own right, embracing Astrian customs while helping the court understand human perspectives. She approached Lyra now, holding a small box. "This has been in our family for generations," she said, opening it to reveal a delicate silver necklace. "And now it belongs to you." Lyra felt her colors shift with emotion as Catherine fastened the necklace around her neck. The human jewelry caught the light differently than Astrian pieces, creating an elegant contrast with her luminescent skin. "A perfect blend," Empress Celeste approved. "Just like this alliance." The ceremony itself was held in the Grand Crystal Chamber, its vast dome opening to the sky above. Thousands of guests, both human and Astrian, filled the space. But when Marcus entered in his formal uniform, modified with traditional Astrian elements, Lyra saw only him. Their vows were spoken in both languages, the words carrying ancient meanings and new promises. When Marcus touched her hand, Lyra's colors surged in a brilliant display that drew gasps of appreciation from the assembled guests. Even Grand Minister Vax, watching from his place of honor, showed colors of approval and acceptance. "Today we witness not just the union of two individuals," Emperor Theron proclaimed, but the birth of a new era. An era where the strength of humanity and the wisdom of the Astrian Empire come together to create something greater than either alone. As the ceremony concluded, a joint fleet of human and Astrian ships performed a magnificent aerial display overhead. The maneuvers combined human precision with Astrian artistry, creating patterns in the sky that would have been impossible for either fleet alone. At the celebration that followed, Marcus and Lyra moved among their guests, their easy interaction setting an example for both species. Humans learned to read Astrian color signals while Astrians became more comfortable with human expressions of emotion. Look at them, Marcus murmured to Lyra as they watched a group of human and Astrian officers animatedly discussing ship designs. A few months ago, they could barely be in the same room without diplomatic incidents. We gave them permission to change, Lyra replied, her colors shifting playfully. To see beyond their preconceptions. Speaking of change, Marcus's expression grew thoughtful. The Joint Fleet Command has requested we lead the next expedition to the Outer Territories. They want us to show other worlds what's possible when humans and Astrians work together. Lyra felt her colors brighten with excitement. A chance to explore the unknown together? To face new challenges as equals? It won't be easy, he warned, though his smile suggested he knew exactly how she would respond. Good, she echoed his words from the garden. Life without challenges gets boring. And I have a feeling that life with you will never be boring. As the celebration continued around them, Lyra and Marcus stood together at the great crystal window, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, new adventures awaited them. But for now, they had this moment, this perfect fusion of two worlds, two cultures, two hearts. The fearsome human commander and the luminescent alien princess had found something neither expected, a love that transcended species, a partnership that defied expectations, and a future bright with possibilities. Above them, the crystal city shimmered with combined human and Astrian lights, a beacon of hope for a galaxy learning that the greatest strength comes not from standing alone, but from reaching across the stars to join hands with those who are different. And in that light, a new chapter in the story of both their peoples was just beginning.